Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin.
This one should be fun. Hattie Boydle. Wow. It's an honor to get you on here. Big smile for those watching the videos. And for anybody who's been living under a rock and is not familiar with you, you are a world champion competitor. In fact, I consider you one of the most prominent fitness competitors of our generation. And, but not just that, you're a prominent coach, public speaker, and educator in the industry from Australia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. And I just as you shared, I've been around for so long. I've been in this industry for 18 years and it kind of feels like such a crazy thing to say that out loud. And I often call myself the grandma of the fitness industry because I'm like, I'm still here. I'm still here and I'm still competing. But I'm still here because it just gets better. And I feel grateful that, in so many ways I still have, some relevance and people are still interested. So I'm very lucky in that respect.
Well, I think it says a lot because not many prominent competitors go into coaching and evidence-based education. It's actually kind of a rare thing. I've got a few friends. I had Ava Cowan on not terribly long ago. And my good friend, Natalia Mello, is quite prominent as a former Miss Olympia. And Ben Kulski as well has been on before. But most of the competitors don't do what you end up doing. Why is that?
Natalia Mello?
Yes.
I remember when I first started competing when I was 21, so 15 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing posing. And I just went on YouTube and I saw her. And I literally just tried to replicate what she was doing. And I was like, oh my God, this woman. She's still like, oh my God. But yeah, she's no longer competing. And, I remember saying to myself when I was 29, so 7 years ago, there's no way I'm going to be competing when I'm 30. No way. And then I got to 30 and my physique was just like so much better than it was when I was 21 and so much better than it was when I won the world titles. And I was like, why would I stop now? And even now, being 36 and doing these shows, I'm bringing my best ever package. And I'm like, because I told myself, this is the last year, and then it's like, is it? Like, it's so interesting. So interesting, the stories we tell ourselves.
This episode is brought to you by Macros First. I've always struggled with nutrition tracking apps, even the slightest hassle or friction, and it breaks my habit. That changed with Macros First. When I tried it, I told my friend, the founder, Jacob, quote, this is, let's just call it a certain other app on steroids. It's the easiest app to use, and it has a free barcode scanner, which if you use tracking apps, you know this is a really big deal. I recommend Macros First to all my clients and friends, and even had them sponsor my 2024 conference. Here's an example of feature that I love. The verified food database. Remember using other apps and searching for a food only to find 10 to 50 similar options with different macros, not knowing which one to pick. This kind of friction is the shit that made me quit tracking altogether. Macros First, every single food item in the database, over 3 million of them, is human verified. No junk entries, so you can trust the numbers. Plus, that free barcode scanner makes logging faster. And if the barcode doesn't turn anything up, just point your camera at the nutrition label and Macros First will extract all the nutrition info instantly. All this just makes tracking easier. And while Macros First's premium version is incredible for any user, the basic version, which is nowhere near basic, is free to use. So you can go to either the Apple Store or Google Play to download.
Does the continued competition fuel your passion for the educational side, or does the educational side fuel the passion for competing?
I think the want and need to help others is what fuels education. I'm still a coach, so I know that a lot of people, maybe when they get a big following, they do the apps and they do like take my program. I'm a coach. I actually spend 90% of my week coaching people. And so that in itself is, I'm like, there's so many people that need help. Competing's just my own personal venture that I get to do, that I get to see what I'm fully capable of. And so it's a very selfish thing that I like to do because I do it for me and no one else. But I get to learn all these things about myself, and then I get to express it to my clients. Like, hey, I'm learning this thing about myself, and where did that apply to you, or is there any relevance in the journey that you're having? But the education thing, especially around, I've had the absolute pleasure, and I'd say honor, of working with two incredible minds, Tony Bataji and Sebastian Oro, for a decade. Sometimes it was only with Sebastian, sometimes it was only with Tony, and for a lot of it, it was, at the same time. And I managed to somehow make it all work. And I owe so much of my coaching and education, and also being a great athlete, to these two people. And I worked with these people in person for a decade, and I can't begin to tell you how much of an impact that's made on me. And so I think having two great minds around me, I learned so much, and I became, just really passionate about getting great education out there. And I'm also a massive fan of mindset, because you can get the macros for free. You can follow someone's training program. We now have AI, but AI is never going to do what I can do. Like, I know AI is never going to take my job, because it's never going to be a human, and we need human experience. But also, I think I'm just so passionate about helping others, because there's so many people that need to be helped. And something that I shared on my social media this morning is, like, I totally understand why people are so confused, because we have an enormous amount of information coming in 24/7. As long as you're on your phone, you have information coming in.
Mhm.
As long as you're on your computer, you have information coming in. And it's really tricky, because we have some really charismatic gurus that preach things that are not scientifically true, but sound so great when you hear it from these people. And then we have these amazing physiques on the internet who are preaching what they do that has no evidence whatsoever. They've got no qualifications, but because it worked for them and they look a certain way, people follow it. And I'm constantly battling that all the time with people that ask me questions, and I ask, where do you get it from? And then we've got the evidence-based community. We have the research, we have the researchers, we have the science. And unfortunately, researchers aren't always in shape. And some of the best coaches in the world aren't always in shape. And because they're not in shape, people don't listen to them. And it's really, really tricky. So maybe being in shape has been really helpful for me to be able to help people listen to me. Because I do take the research and I do take the evidence, and I've had amazing coaches that I can apply and apply it to myself and apply it to my clients, and we get wonderful results. But unfortunately, it's this shiny thing. Like, there's like a barrier to entry of, like, someone being listened to, which often comes down to the way they look, or even now the way they sound. Like, the confidence of how they sell it, plays a really big role as well.
Insecurity's loud.
That's why I say fear screams. It's like when we feel fear, it's like it's so loud, but when it's confidence, it's whispers. So, yeah.
Oftentimes the more knowledgeable people are unsure because they don't speak in absolute, because they understand that there's always nuance to it. And all too often the loudest voices are overconfident figures that actually don't have a fundamental understanding of what they're talking about.
Something that you just shared right there was, a lot of the smartest people in the room, they don't speak in absolutes. And I feel that the audience, or the people that want answers, they want absolutes. So in the same way that a lot of people start, like, the carnivore diet or a particular diet that restricts food groups, what it means is it makes it easier for them to follow. This is all I need to do. I can't have carbs. Cool. I know I just need to eat protein. And so it's almost like extreme is easy, balance is hard, because balance gives you options, gives you choice. And because they lack any sort of knowledge on anything, choice is overwhelming. And choice can be really overwhelming. And sometimes we say we want choice, but we really don't. We want to be told what to do. And so restriction is almost easier.
This episode is brought to you by Renaissance Periodization and the RP Hypertrophy app. RP is the industry leader in muscle building, coaching, and education. This app is like having a coach in your pocket. It gives you everything you need, including training programs, form videos. It gives you all your sets, reps, and weights, so you just show up and follow the plan. It adjusts each week based off your progress. And the app was created by Dr. Mike Israetel, Nick Shaw, and the team at RP, who I've known for many years. And the entire team are incredible people who've always been supportive and generous with me, so I know their character and are easy to endorse. My library contains several RP books And I've used RP training principles in my workouts and coaching with my clients for many years, long before the explosion in popularity of their YouTube channel, which is worth checking out. RP is the first sponsor I felt remotely comfortable endorsing after over 7 years of podcasting. And if hiring a one-on-one coach isn't for you, using the RP Hypertrophy app is the next best thing to maximize your gains and take the guesswork out of your program. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. And I've also got a serious discount for you of up to $50 US. Go to rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP, or go to the link below in the show notes. And that's rpstrength.com/coats. Use the code COATSRP.
Okay. Quote, muscle growth isn't limited by gender. It's limited by the effort you put in. Can you explain the context in which women can build muscle equally as effectively as men?
So there was a study that was done, and now I can't remember what year it was done. And it was really quite interesting because I was looking for some answers around, so often, I guess, there's this misconception around how much muscle women can build. And actually, when we look at, in terms of like relative muscle growth, women can build muscle relatively the same as men. Now, by nature, men are bigger than us. And actually, when they looked at like upper body to lower body, there was some variance in terms of like muscle size for the men versus women. But when it comes to women being able to grow muscle in the same, at the same kind of like rate as men, we can do it. And so I think we need to let go of some of the myths that women can't grow muscle, or women shouldn't be as can't be big. There are some amazing athletes that can grow significant muscle, and genetics play their role. So genetics play their role in how nutrition and training will essentially interfere with the body. So yes, there are some people that genetically seem to be able to respond much quicker than others when it comes to growing muscle. And we can't blame genetics, because you still have to do the effort. You still have to train with nutrition and do consistency and all those things. But genetics play their part, but that doesn't mean it's everything. And then in terms of like, can women build muscle at the same rate as men? Yeah, they can. It's just not going to be as much. So yeah.
As you said, it's relative to your starting point, and the average woman is going to be smaller with less muscle mass than the average man. Right? The largest and strongest humans on Earth at the very edge of the bell curve are going to be men, but there will be a fair number of women who are actually more muscular and stronger than a percentage of the men walking around.
And I remember I put that post up, and this guy messaged right back, and it was like, it was having a dig. It's like, why can't you just let us be stronger or something? And I'm like, I'm not saying that you're not stronger. Like, it's like, can't you be happy that women can, have a great response to training just like men can? So it's really interesting to hear. And it's often like it's just a misunderstanding or a misconception around the female body versus the male body. And, we're looking at so much more research now around, like, for a lot of times it's like women should train like this, men should train like this, but it's actually not true. Women and men can train the same and they're going to get a result. Like, it's actually not independent. But when we look at what women want to hypertrophy versus men that want to hypertrophy, like, men aren't going, I want massive glutes. Well, some might be, but women predominantly want bigger lower bodies. They don't, not all of them, but some do want bigger upper bodies. So when we look at how much training we do to build particular body parts that we want to bring up, there's going to be a variance to that.
Yeah.
So,
in my experience coaching people, usually the differences in training style have more to do with the preference of the trainees, not any biological need. And as far as that guy who is upset, that's more insecurity is loud bullshit again.
Yes.
All right. Here's what I've always wondered. So I've discussed this with Holly Baxter in the past, and if everything works out to scheduling, she'll be on again soon. But you're also a good example of this. How challenging is it to remain relatively lean all year round?
This is a great question. And I want a bit of clarity. Is it how easy or hard is it for me, or is it in general for most people?
Well, I think we're looking for the answer for both, because there's going to be your experience, but also is your experience going to be something that an average woman can achieve? Because if anybody is listening and is not overly familiar with you, they probably now need to go and open up and follow you on Instagram, because they're going to see someone who, unless you're doing it the way the old bodybuilding magazines did it, where all the photo shoots were within a couple of weeks of 1 or 2 shows a year, unless you're just filming everything and a ton of B-roll over a couple of weeks, the rest of the year you're hiding out in sweats. The reality is you are muscular and very lean, especially compared to an average woman.
Yes. So I'll start off with sharing my experience, and then I'll be able to kind of relate it to others. Just a bit of background for anyone that doesn't know anything about me. Growing up, I was an elite gymnast for 9 years. So when I look at the amount of training I've done over my lifetime of 36 years, it has been like, I've done nothing more than that. Like, training and nutrition has been the thing that I've been so consistent with, the most consistent with I've been in anything in my lifetime. So before I even started weight training, I was an elite gymnast. I started weight training when I was 17 years old. I'm now 36. I've been weight training for a long time. Not to say I did everything right in the beginning, but I certainly learned. But I've been consistently tracking my nutrition and training with high intent for, I'd say, a solid 15 years. Let's get the first couple of years right. We made all the mistakes. And so, yes, I stay what most people would say lean all year. When I get DEXA scans, which I do throughout the year to track just progress in general, I've never seen higher than 14% on a DEXA scan. And that is when I've been eating 3,500 calories. And I've only seen that twice. Normally in my off season, I sit about 12.5% body fat. And that's still eating between 3,000 to 3,500 calories, depending on kind of where I'm at in my building phase and how much food I can just generally get in while managing stress. And so for me, when I look at how am I able to do this, it very much comes down to the fact that I'm not on off with my nutrition and my training. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not flexible. That doesn't mean there's not a day or two where I don't track. Like when I go on holidays, I don't track my nutrition, but I'm very well aware of what I'm eating, and I don't come back heavier. I often come back lighter. I actually don't eat enough. And so I've built these skill sets to have a high level of self-awareness around how much food I need to eat or can eat or should eat. And I eat an abundance of all different foods. It's not really a food group that I don't neglect. It's just that I eat small doses of. So everything's in the dosage. And then I love training. So I train 4 times a week. That's it. Train with intensity. I track my progressive overload. I have periods when I'm not motivated, but I still show up. Because for me, training and nutrition is like brushing my teeth. It's just this thing that I do. Rain, hail, or shine, happy, sad, motivated, unmotivated, build, maintenance. It's just such a big part of my life because I've done it for so long. And I understand the freedom that it gives me within my body. Now, what's interesting about freedom is freedom doesn't come for free. And so there are things that if we want to experience freedom in some way in our bodies, it requires us that we look after it. And so when I look at training and nutrition, that's my self-care. Because we also know that discipline is self-care. So even when I'm not motivated, guess what I do? I do the thing that I know when I do it, even though it might not feel good at the time, I'm happy that I've done it. And this has been a huge milestone in why I have been able to, even in my builds, stay in relatively good shape, because I respect the process. So therefore I trust it. But before I respected the process, I had to understand the process. And I think a lot of us, or people that are, going into a build for the first time, or starting a diet for the first time, or even trying to change your body composition for the first time, all you're doing initially is following instruction. And that's great. It works. But I invite you to learn about what you're doing, become invested in how things interact with the body, why we need protein, what carbohydrates do for performance, why we can't just be low fat all the time, why we need different forms of fat coming into our bodies for our hormones. Like, why are we doing these things? Like, why do we have a 80% whole food, 20% soul food kind of, nutrition philosophy, so that we can do it sustainably. And so following instruction is great, but it's not enough, because as soon as the instruction's gone away, or maybe the person guiding you is gone, you haven't learned anything. And so I now have education, and I have a whole lot of consistency on my belt. And that's the same that I teach my clients. So I don't teach my clients a restrictive way of eating. I teach them, what does sustainability look like to you? And I often ask clients, if I was to ask you, like, how would you create your own nutritional philosophy? And when I look at a nutrition philosophy or nutritional philosophy, it's not what we eat, it's how we eat. So if you were to look at the rest of your life and be like, well, how would I like to eat? You can then start to create some guidelines or some boundaries or some, I don't want to say rules, because rules can sometimes be broken, but how would you like to eat? Like when people cut out sugar, I'm like, you think you have to do that, but you might not have to do that. The devil's in the dosage. Can we learn food behaviors? Now, I know that psychology plays a massive role in nutrition. And like, can I share with everyone, I have had the worst eating habits under the sun. I had to have my own lessons. But the thing that I learned was, how do I have balance? How do I have moderation? How do I have my cake and eat it too? Because for a lot of my 20s, when I lived in Sydney especially, I was the only one of my friends that was in the fitness industry. All my other friends were in hospitality. So there was restaurants and travel, and I didn't want to miss out, but I also didn't want to not honor my goals. So in 2014, I reached out to Lane Norton. So I worked with Lane Norton years and years and years ago, because I wanted to learn flexible dieting. I was so curious, like, how do you do this thing? And what that actually allowed me to do was improve my relationship with food, including how I labeled it. So the language I used towards it, and then the stories I created about it. And then learning how to have a little bit of everything, and realizing, hey, I can still be an athlete and I can still do all these things. I kind of went off in a little bit of rabbit hole there, Andrew. So I hope what I shared makes sense to everyone listening, but consistency, everyone, is a massive part.
Well, this is fantastic. It's exactly what I'm looking for. Along the way, did you have to make any health trade-offs, or have you found a sweet spot where you feel very healthy at this level of body fat?
Well, what is really interesting is, so in the last year and a half, I've been getting blood tests every month. And what's really interesting, Andrew, is there are some markers that are good and some markers that are quite interesting. And some markers have said that I'm trending towards hypothyroidism. But it's interesting to look at, like, any other blood tests that I've had previously to these years. My bloods have essentially been the same for like 10 years. And so I'm like, do I just have a really resilient body? Because I feel amazing. Like, I've got, at the moment, well, I must say I'm sick and I feel quite exhausted. But outside of that, like 2 weeks before I was sick, I was like, I can do this forever. Like, I can do this for so long. And even after the show, I'm probably going to stay pretty lean for a long time, even reversing my calories out, because one, I follow a process, and two, my body can just seems to handle quite a bit of food for a while. But I'm sure there's a trade-off at some point. It's not my goal to stay this lean like what I am. I'm about 7% body fat. This is what I tend to compete at the moment, and I've been here for a couple of weeks now. And it's funny, like, I still have a menstrual cycle. I still have a libido. I still, like, am functioning at work mostly. I'm like, I feel like I can still do it so effortlessly with effort, if that makes sense. Well, I'm not saying that that's the reason I should stay in this position for so long. But in terms of, like, my, where I sit in my my off seasons with still low body fat, I mean, again, I still get my menstrual cycle. I haven't had any issues like that. I've still been able to grow muscle. So I don't know. We'll see.
Because your competitive career has been a very prominent part of you, your brand identity, and because you have been so lean for so long, do you feel pressure to stay lean as well because of how you feel you have to show up for social media?
That's a really great question. And if I ask myself, the answer is no. I think for me, how I like to look is for how I like to look. And funny enough, like I feel the best when I'm in a build.
Yeah.
Feel strong, can eat a lot of food. I definitely don't have an attachment to looking like this, but what I will say is it's really fucking cool to see what the body can do. And I may never be pregnant. I don't think I want kids. And I think that is like a rite of passage for a lot of females to be able to create a body, a human in your own body. I think that's the most amazing thing. And I may never have that experience, but I have this experience. And I have this amazing machine that I get to do all these wonderful things with. And I get to see like really what its capabilities are. And that's the thing I love about prep. That's the thing that really entrenches me into the prep. I don't care about show day. I love the process. I love the training intensity. I have not felt unmotivated at all, no matter what's going on. I can't wait to get to the gym. When I'm training with my coach, I'm just like testing his boundaries, testing my boundaries. And it's just, I feel so alive. But I can't say I have an attachment to this body, but I do feel grateful that I get to experience doing this, because it is pretty cool.
This all makes me think of, there are always examples of someone who is famous. Like I have fun with our industry because there are definitely people who are quite famous in our industry, but nobody in our industry is really kind of famous like The Rock. And of course, the last few days, The Rock, there's been pictures of him where he is he's lost a fair bit of weight, but he stripped out. And of course, there's a lot of buzz about this, some negative, some positive. Same thing happened to Dave Bautista when he lost a whole bunch of weight for a movie role. And then you get Jennifer Love Hewitt not too long ago. And a Canadian singer who's quite popular a while ago named Nelly Furtado recently performed.
Yeah.
And she gained weight. Jennifer Love Hewitt had gained weight. And, I thought our media, I think the mainstream media no longer does this, but, the social media side of things, they were merciless. And I was surprised to see that this is still a thing. And I wonder if that can get into someone's head about, I'm going to get older. My priorities are going to change. I myself, I was recently with Dr. Mike Isertel and Nick Shaw and a bunch other IFBB pros at an RP strength event in Texas. And I'm not a small human, but I'm walking around with some really jacked, really lean people. And I felt the difference in that space. Now I'm pretty good. I'm getting a little older. I'm comfortable with the idea. I've, down a little bit of weight, but I stepped on a scale when I got home and it'd been the lightest I've been in probably over a decade. And it's like, whoa. And I don't know if I was comfortable with the idea. It hit me fun.
So wait, can I just
Sure.
ask you the question? So you don't know if you're okay with the idea of what?
Well, there's conflict because for a while I thought I embraced the idea of, well, I'm going to gradually let myself get a little light or a little small. At my peak, I'm 6'2", but I walked around at 260 pounds, fairly lean.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was on the scale recently, and I've probably been in more of the 245, 250 range for the last 2-3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I hit a scale and I was 237 and I went, whoa. And even though part of me had been saying for a while, this is going to be the progression, I wasn't great with it. And I acknowledge that. Like my reaction was, oh, I don't know if I like this. So there's conflict.
Do you notice about yourself when that happened? Like what was the story that you told yourself?
See, I love that because that's the question I ask every client all the time. What was the story you told yourself? And I don't know, because the idea behind that is we're all post-rationalization machines, right? We do things out of instinct or emotion or what have you. But I don't know. I'm still exploring it a little bit. My initial reaction was, no, I want to put more muscle and more size on again. That was my initial reaction. And to pay a little bit more attention to, all right, I've got to eat a little bit more. That was one of the things I said. Got to increase my carbs. But it's more of a confronting it and not having all the answers as opposed to knowing exactly how I feel about it, if that makes sense. So if anybody else is experiencing this, you know, I'm experiencing it.
Mm. I mean, something I do think about, obviously, and I say it often, is like, I'm not going to be in the fitness industry forever. I'm not going to have this body forever. I mean, I told myself I wasn't going to be competing when I was 30, and then this year we're not going to be competing because this is the last year, I'm getting older, all those things. And so, but then, it's such an interesting thing. It's like, is the story that we told ourselves real? Like, is getting older really as bad as what we think it is? And I often think about muscle and muscle density and wisdom, and we earn wisdom and muscle maturity as we get older. So is it really the worst thing that's going to happen? But it is interesting to tell ourselves a story. And I'm curious as to where your initial story came from, which was, I'm going to get lighter, or I'm going to be okay with getting lighter. Because that was the initial thing. And then you got lighter and you were like, oh shit. Am I really sure that that's what I want to do? So I'm curious for you, Andrew, like where the initial, okay, yeah, I'm going to let myself be lighter, where that came from.
Well, it's getting older and knowing that at 47 right now, it is harder to walk around, certainly in the 260 range. And I notice a big difference between how I feel between 260 and 250, right? Last few years, a lot more attention to cardio. I was one of those people that, yep, I can lift and I don't need cardio. That idea changed. And then just decided, okay, I want to eat a little bit less, be a little bit, I could get away with whatever with my diet for a really long time. And now it's like, okay, well, let's be a little bit smarter about this stuff. But honestly, when confronted with evidence that I was progressing along something that I said I should be doing, and I don't know if it was something I knew I want to do, but maybe the story is that this is something that's going to happen anyway, and therefore it's a good thing. But when it actually happens, it's like, oh, I don't know if I like this very much, right? And because it does sort of feel like a little bit of a threat to our identity, right? My identity personally, but I relate this to other people because I'm sure that this is not a unique experience.
Interesting. The word that you use is I should be, because often good is an expectation that, as you named, like, well, I'm getting older, I should be. It's like, yeah, but that might not be what you really want. Like, and so I think there some exploring.
Hence the story. Hence the story, right? Hence the story. And I think, again, a lot of times these stories are, again, it's dressing both for our emotional reaction to things and for everybody else that we think is the most socially acceptable explanation for, well, either A, something that we're going to do anyway emotionally, or B, something that's probably inevitable. It's probably unlikely I can get into my 60s or 70s as a lean 260-pound person, right? Or the things I'm going to have to do that are going to come at great health costs, right? So I'm not interested in that either.
Yeah, the trade-off. I think the thing that's really good to think about is a trade-off. And I guess when I initially made the decision this year to say this is my last year of competing, it was because I was looking at, well, what are the trade-offs to doing this sport? And it is, my face gets so gaunt. I'm like, oh, I look at something like my little face, and it's a lot of effort. It's so much effort. And, there's so much time that gets spent to doing a preparation that I lose time doing other things that might be important to my business or to my own growth.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's a trade-off to everything. But I also am not going to rule out, if I do ever decide to come back to competing because it feels right and my physique's in a place where I'm like, fuck, let's go. It's always going to be there. But I think sometimes when we use age as the limitation, we then just limit ourselves. And I often find that with a lot of women in particular, it's like the age thing, that's the limitation. It's like, that's just a story that you told, because we also see so many other amazing 50, 60, 70-year-olds doing amazing things because they haven't let age be the limitation. And I, funny enough, feel so inspired by a lot of my older clients who are, I call them fabulous and 50, or 50 and fabulous, or 50 and fucking fabulous. Like, they're like, I'm turning 50. I'm going to be my best. And I'm like, yes, give me that energy. I love that. Like, that's inspiring for me because being in the industry and being like, even on the Gold Coast, everyone's chasing young. Like, everyone just wants to be young. And I want to do my best to age gracefully. and effortlessly, but also like still make the most out of my body. And I don't want this age thing to be my limitation. I want to make the call to say, well, I just don't love it anymore. Or, there's other things that I want to spend my time doing. And so there is a trade-off for you because you're a big boy. I'm not a big girl. I catfish people into thinking that I'm tall and I'm big, but I'm 56 kilos wringing wet and I'm only 5'2" or 5'3". But it's really interesting, the limitations that we put on ourselves. And then, we always find evidence of why that's true. But if we zoom out, it's like, well, is that really true? In the court of law, is that really true? Or is it just a part of me that feels like that way in this moment? And then that's what I feel most comfortable saying.
For the coaches listening, there's a clinic here in coaching. And I haven't revealed this yet, but I've been working on something for personal trainers, for in-person personal trainers. So a lot of work to do, but it's going to be a resource, something big. And there's going to be a big part about coaching and asking questions, and particularly getting into the stories we tell ourselves is going to be a big part of it because there's power there. And you can tell a really skilled coach, just the way you approach this conversation. So for the coaches, go back and re-listen to the way Hattie framed all that stuff, because that's good. Let's circle back to the original premise of the question. Is it more challenging for women to stay lean than men? And again, lean is a nebulous term. It's probably relative to each person. But I guess we also know that on average, women carry higher body fat percentages than men at the same appearance of leanness. And that's largely due to the actual differences in physiology. But do you find that it is harder? Because again, you're probably an edge of the bell curve outlier on this one. I've got one client, a little client I think of, who is probably walks around as lean as this, who's in her 50s and just shredded lean all the time, year round, all that. But for you and coaching people, do you think whether it's physiologically or psychologically, it's harder for women to get that lean and stay that lean?
I think it's very nuanced. I think it's very individual. I think it's genetics play their role. I think environment plays its role. I think the stress is a big part of it. If we look at like the global community, there's a lot of men out of shape. There's a lot of women out of shape. There's a lot of men in shape. There's a lot of women in shape. Is it harder? I don't think I can answer that. I don't know, because I have a handful of women that, again, effortlessly stay lean, and lean is relative. And then, I don't tend to work with as many men, so I can't, say yes or no. But my partner was telling me a statistic the other day, and apparently it is that there is something like there's a higher percentage of men in the US who are millionaires than men that have abs. Like that is wild. And, you and I were in the fitness industry. Probably our friends are somewhat pretty in shape. I'm on the Gold Coast. It is a fitness hub. You bet everyone is out walking. It's like rain, hell or shine. People are at the beach. Doesn't matter what day it is, what's doing with the weather. Like, it is a fitness culture that we have such a high percentage of people in shape. But when you go to like certain other areas of the Gold Coast, or when you go to like some events, I went to the ballet with a friend not long ago, and I looked around and I was like, oh my God, everyone was deconditioned. And I was like, I'm not in the fitness industry right now. And I was like, well, actually, this is majority of the world. When Coben and I, my partner and I, go traveling to Europe, we get stared at because we are not normal, like, to these people. But what we are used to is seeing muscle-on females, lean females. So it's really interesting what we are used to. And actually, like, we are actually working with such a small market because the majority of the world is really out of shape. So kind of went on a rabbit hole there with that question. And yeah, I don't think I can answer that, but I think it's very nuanced and it's very individual.
I'm not looking for black and white answers. So the nuanced, thoughtful rabbit hole answer is actually the best. I love your choice of the word decondition. That's where I go as well. I find it's a kinder, softer, gentler word where we're looking at population. You made me think of, again, most of my time is spent in and around gym environments, right? So I see fit people all over, and a lot of very normal looking people as well. But the space that I get out into, and sometimes I zoom out and look around, I'm like, holy shit, it's Costco. I do a biweekly Costco run. And sometimes I zoom out and, forgive the thought, but it's like, I feel like a titan walking around in terms of, the difference in physique, right? And then part of that's the height factor, but it's like, holy shit. Yeah. And you're right. That's the real world, not this microcosm echo chamber that I think we all too often live with it. And then there's what are we following and exposing ourselves to on social media, right? And comparing against.
Well, isn't it interesting? And I think about this all the time, Andrew. If you look at some of the people that have huge accounts, they're just in shape people. And why do you think that is? Because the majority of the world is out of shape. And so to see someone with a crazy physique, and there's some crazy physiques out there. There's some impressive physiques out there. It's put on a pedestal because, again, the majority of the world would love to look like that, don't know how to look like that, and may never look like that. Like, because there's 1%ers and there's 10%ers, So it is really interesting. I always look at why fitness models have so much influence. It's because everyone wants to look like that and they don't know how. And so it gets glorified, just like in the way that comp prep gets glorified. And something that I have an internal struggle with is in ways I glorify it. I do my videos. I'm feeling empowered. I'm feeling myself with my physique, but I freaking know how hard it is to do this thing. And when people say to me, "Oh, I look like you," I'm like, how do I say this as kindly as possible? Which is, there's so much more work that you're not seeing that even if I told you about it, you still wouldn't get it. And I've also been doing this for 15 years. So you see how I am now, not because of what I've done in the last 12 weeks, but because I've done over my lifetime. And I'm not saying that someone could get there faster than me. They probably could, because I've made a lot of mistakes. But it's still a lifetime of work. And so that's also what we often see on the internet, and not all everything we see on the internet is real either.
I think how to ask this question. You've alluded to mistakes and you've alluded to nutrition that wasn't ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And you grew up in gymnastics.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a word I like. I use the word artifact, the belief systems, the culture, the pressures of something like gymnastics. I have a brand new client who I know her family quite well, who came out of the gymnastics world. So I know some of the dark stuff. And you get people who would be like, "Hey, I want to look like you." Are there trade-offs they don't know about, they wouldn't be willing to make?
Yeah, of course. I guess the discipline factor is a high one. I got up at 5:30 a.m. I need to get 20,000 steps in a day. I have to do 400 calories, which is about an hour of cardio 5 days a week. And then I also have to weight train and progress and get stronger. And then I have to, eat the calories. And no matter what calories I'm on, whether it's 1,600, whether it's 2,700, the hunger is still there at both ends. And then you have to do that for a long period of time. You miss out on, I'm missing out on one of my best friends. She's finally getting married. I'm missing out on her hens. There's so many social events that I miss out on. I'm not saying all of them. I still make myself be social, but there's always a trade-off to any goal that we want to achieve in life. There's always sacrifices. And so you always have to ask you, is it worth it? And for a lot of people, that sacrifice is working really, really, really hard for a long time. It's also challenging. So a lot of relationships, I'm lucky that my partner is also a bodybuilder, so he gets it and I get it with him. But for a lot of people that don't understand what you're doing, it, from a social construct, it can shake things up with people, with family, with, don't want to say religion, but maybe, what's the word? Not religion, but, customs and things like, it's like you're coming to a family event and you might be Greek or, Croatian, or it might be like another, one of those kind of countries, and oh, you're not eating? That's really disrespectful, and it's really hard from the family point of view. But yeah, the way we want to look, or the body that we want to have, like I mentioned before, it does not come for free. Even though we might experience a sense of freedom, being able to love how we look, it comes at a cost. And you just have to ask yourself whether the cost is worth it. Because the cost of staying the same and being miserable with how you look That has a trade-off. You're miserable. You're the same. On the other side, if you want to change, if you want to lose some weight, or if you want to get strong, you want to build muscle, there's a trade-off to that. There's a cost to that. And so you just have to ask yourself, like, what price am I willing to pay? And then we have to understand that even though there's a price to pay over here, there's also value. There's improved health. There's feeling good about yourself. There's self-development, progression. There's discipline, this thing that we all say we want, yet we fail to exercise. And we have to find enough amount of motivation. Goals require desire and fear. We need both to be successful at them. We need the fear of staying the same to be so much to take action. But we also need the desire of wanting to change, to see what's over here, to keep us motivated. So fear takes us away, but pushes us away. Desire pulls us forward. We want both of those when it comes to achieving our goals. And so many times people can say, I want to lose 5 kilos. But if they haven't got a bit of fear of staying the same, and if they haven't got the desire to be the better version of themselves, they will start and stop. Or they will do all or nothing. And all or nothing will just be a lot of adrenaline, which is the fear base. Not enough of the dopamine. And so we actually need to have both of them, which is why we track progression. Which is why we measure ourselves. Because if we don't measure ourselves, guess what? How do we know we're being successful? And when things get hard and when we get tired and we're looking for evidence that we're doing well and we haven't measured anything, guess what we do? Default back to where we were before. I failed. No, you didn't. You're just in a challenging moment. You get to decide now. Do I keep moving forward? Do I practice consistency? Or do I say this is too much and I'd prefer to be back here? So clarity around why we want to change, or the body that we want to have, and knowing what the cost is or the sacrifices we make. As long as we understand what they are, we can use them as structure and foundations to keep us moving forward and keep practicing the things that are going to be required of us to keep making those changes.
It's a lot of powerful stuff there. Something you said earlier, and it relates to a question I had, a quote from you. Quote, if more women put the same intent and intensity into their process when they are building as they do when they are cutting, they would achieve their dream physiques a lot earlier. Talk about it.
Everybody respects the diet, but not enough people respect the build. Or should the diet pace versus the build? Losing weight is easy. Building muscle's hard. And we spoke about it a little bit earlier around, a lot of people say, oh, trust the process, but you can't trust it when you don't understand it, which is why following instruction is not enough. Because you say to your coach, I want to build muscle. Great. Well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to start putting in place the things that you need to follow to start building muscle. But if you don't understand why, not just the why, but the how and the what, then you're just doing the thing. You're not actually putting intention into tracking your nutrition. You're going to do, oh, well, I'm building. Don't worry, I've got more calories. And we stop organizing our food and pre-planning our food. We stop using MyFitnessPal or following the diet plan. We show up to training and we don't push at the intensity that we need to actually force the body to change. And then we get a little bit frugal with our sleep and we don't manage our stress. But we often find that we're in a dieting phase. What do? We don't want to be hungry. So guess what we do? We organize our food. We pre-plan. We hit our protein. We show up to the gym and train and we get our steps in. Like there's so much more almost like this intensity or fear, like I've got to lose the fat. And then we don't just want fear, right? We want the desire. But when it comes to the build, it shouldn't be this on-off phase. Like I said, it's like shifting gears. The process stays the same, except we get to eat a little bit more. And actually, we get to have more fun in training because we can handle a little bit more volume. And most women love more volume because they're volume junkies. But we can also get strong. We can also feel really empowered by the effort that we're actually capable of because we have energy to do it. And yes, we have a little bit more flexibility, maybe a bit more flexibility in foods that we can eat, more flexibility in the volume of food we can eat. We might even notice that we are able to eat out maybe once or twice a week, or a little bit more than what we could when we were dieting. But we don't want to take the hands off the steering wheel. It shouldn't be this thing that feels on and off. And what I've learned from a lot of clients, including myself, is we all say we want to build muscle, yet we have this really unhealthy relationship with weight gain. And that may be and I'm interested to hear maybe your experience, Andrew, of your own or maybe with clients, is in the past when we've gained weight, it's because we've labeled it as we're eating bad, drinking too much, not looking after ourselves. So we associate weight gain with those three things. But when we follow a process and we see the weight go up, it's like scary because we still have an old association with weight gain, which is bad. Yet we can look back and go, well, I followed the process. So actually that gain on the scale was a result from following the process. And what I've learned from myself and clients is the clients that thrive in a build are the ones that are following the process. They're the ones that are going, I'm doing the thing. I'm empowered by the food I'm eating. Look at my numbers in the gym. They're honoring the sleep. They go out less on the weekend because they want to be able to show up to training and hit the number that they want to beat than the last week. And so they have this respect to it, but they're also they want to learn about it. They want to learn like why they should have more carbs here, or where's a more optimal way of having their nutrition, or how much sleep should they get, or when is, should I push failure here? And they become really curious around how they can actually make more or get more out of themselves with that effort. But when a client does a build and they get too flexible, flexibility is a tool, not the goal. It's a tool, not the goal. But we use it so that we can have a sustainable approach to our goals. And it's not all or nothing, and it's not a perfectionist mindset. But we still need to have discipline in there. And I always say that discipline and flexibility, they can coexist. That's what tracking macros is. That's why it does give a lot of people freedom, and it can educate us that we can have our cake and eat it too, which is not going to have the whole cake.
You asked, and I encountered this phenomenon a lot, especially with women 30-ish, 40-ish, 50-ish. They experience a lot of language, usually from mom, certainly from culture. And it's not to blame mom, because where's mom getting it from? I use Oprah both as literal and metaphor for these cultural belief systems. And these women ended up downloading, again, I'll use the term artifacts of someone else's belief system. And it usually was pressure language around your value is in your smallness, your leanness, your attractiveness to someone else. And there was a lot of pressure to fit that. And that's a lot of belief indoctrination that someone has to undo growing up, because again, you're a teenager, pre-teenage woman. This is the language that you're hearing from, again, mom or beauty magazines, or mom's saying about herself. And the term diet culture we often hear, the diet culture that mom came through with. And kids, whether it's language they hear or the modeling of the behavior that they see. And I've encountered this a whole lot. And that's something that you have to bring to the surface. And it's not as easy as pointing it out and going, hey, now you can let go of this. But I do find it helpful to actually get people to realize, wait a second, where did this come from? This doesn't belong to me. I don't need to hold on to it. Not that simple, but that's a starting point to then go, all right, what do I value? And we're now talking more about bone health. We're talking more about building muscle and maintaining independence as we get older, and women are far more willing to embrace having muscle. And you're great for this because, yes, your level of leanness may be, I'm going to say it, unattainable for most. However, you are muscular and you wear it incredibly well with confidence. And I think if women see this, they're going to go, that's actually a really good thing. And then it's the quote that I hear all the time. The body of your dreams probably weighs more than you think it does. And I like that quote a lot because I hope that it gets inside someone's mind. And it's the thing that allows them to say, I can let go of these old beliefs and that number on the scale, my emotional relationship with that number, and I can embrace all of the things that are associated with the future I want.
Mm-hmm. It's such a tricky one, isn't it? And I often think about diet culture. You know how cats like claw into like carpets, or they claw into like
I have turf in my basement, and my cat oddly cannot help himself. He will always instinctively dig into it. I'll yell at him, and then he flops over and he looks all, no, I wasn't doing anything wrong. Oh, you. Can't help himself.
it just reminds me of the claws that dig into it. You kind of got to like pick it off like one claw at a time. That's what diet culture is in my eyes. And you just named so beautifully, like the women that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s now, even some of their 40s, they didn't have the evidence that we have now. But they definitely have an ingrained culture. So the supermodel culture, which was amazing, by the way, Mr. Cindy Crawford's, you know, it's so different. But, you know, for us as coaches, we now have to, you know, give grace to those women, but also find ways not just to educate them, because it has to, when it comes to, I think, educating a client, it has to feel relevant to what their needs are. So it doesn't matter how much information you spit at them. It's only going to land if it somehow fits within their story. And so often asking questions is really valuable. And I often ask, what do you make that mean? That's really interesting. Like, is that really true? And so often when we say, what does that make that mean? Is that really true? When they have to say it out loud, they realize it's kind of this thing in my head, but it feels so real. I understand it feels real because you told yourself that so much. But I'm curious, like, is that really true? Because if it's not, are you open to maybe learning something new? Because I have a saying, and it is, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. So if you want to keep fighting me on carbs are bad, or I'm going to get fat at this, or whatever the story is, it doesn't really matter what I say because you want to fight for that. That's fine, cool. But you get to keep that and just understand that this other goal that you say you want, we're not really going to get there until we've come to an understanding that this may not be true. But I need you to believe that. I can't make you believe anything. And again, this is why AI is never going to take my job, because it can't do what we do. This is why human connection and conversation and effective communication actually drives action. But we can't make anyone do anything. I can't make my clients do anything. I can only be of influence by showing, not telling, by showing. And so it is a really hard thing to take someone's limiting belief and say, well, that's not true. It's like they have to learn it for themselves, like that self-leadership or that radical responsibility or radical self-acceptance that we have, understanding that the stories that we tell are not always real, but they feel true in that moment. Well, how do we break them down? We ask questions and we help our clients ask the right questions so that they can come to the answer and say, wow, and now I know where that comes from. And so often women will say, I got it from my mom. My mom used to be like this. I even vividly remember when my mom started to stop eating spaghetti with us. You know, in her eyes, she was told not to eat carbs after 6. She had diet culture and she took all the information that she read and she applied that. And to be honest, she got healthier because she ate more veggies, she ate more fruit, she started to exercise. So it wasn't terrible, but there were some things that she followed, which we now know are not correct, but somehow lived for a long time around what women followed. And I vividly remember my mom watching my mom do that. And I still bring that up with her today. Now she has a much more balanced approach, but it even took me a lot of time to get her to eat protein, to sit down for 2 minutes between her strength sets. Because what she wanted to do was all the aerobic activity she used to do, because she did, you know, the ankle weights thing, and she did everything that she thought was right at the time. And guess what? Her body changed because it was such a new stimulus. And she started to make some changes to her habits, which were both negative or positive. Like she had both. But it did take me some time to get her to eat protein frequently, have carbohydrates around her training, still have them at night, like teach her what carbohydrates were, teach her what proteins were, and get her to sit down for 2 minutes so that she could have a good repeat of high effort for her sets and make improvement across her sets and her reps every week. And I have the honor of being able to program for my mom. And I love it. She's on a mission to be able to squat her age, which is 67. So she's currently at 60 kilos, you know, for doing 4 sets of 8. So that's not bad. But this is, you know, it is such an interesting thing. We are in conflict or battling against people's limiting self-beliefs and or beliefs around what they think is true or what they believe is true. And we're doing this once off and they've had that for years.
I love the reference to asking if this is really true and whether you read Byron Katie's work, Loving What Is. No, she's one of the better encapsulations of that concept. And I know Derek Shivers, I can't remember the name of the book, but he also wrote something recently and talked about, I like thinking about the world this way. There are empirical and objective truths in certain specific things. And then there's everything else. And everything else, the culture we grew up in, all of our beliefs are just that. They're beliefs, they're stories, they're narratives. And when we accept that, even the things that we hold, cherished belief systems, our view about the way the world works, they're all beliefs. And if you allow that to be flexible, then you open the door to actually changing those beliefs. But there's more. How are your beliefs and your stories protecting you? How are they protecting your identity, your ego? Right. And if people start digging in here and really question, and it's uncomfortable, bloody uncomfortable for a lot of people, because then maybe you just might realize you've been doing something that's actually been hurting you for a while. Maybe it's protecting you once upon a time, or protect you from one thing, but it may be hurting you in another way. And are you willing to admit that these beliefs are no longer serving you? And are you willing to change them? Right? Because it's scary. There's safety in retelling the same stories over and over. You don't have to change that way.
Yeah.
There's been a coaching masterclass from Hattie Boydle. I appreciate it. You're going to say something.
I was going to say, a question that I ask is, what would happen if you let that story go? So I also love asking, what's the worst that's going to happen? Tell me what is the worst thing that's going to happen? And so often when we say the thing out loud, it's not bad. But our experience of that when we say it in with ourselves is what drives up the adrenaline, the fight and flight. And then that goes into a cascade of different emotions and different stories. And then we're down the rabbit hole and we're no longer a captain of the ship. We're just a passenger of our own thoughts. And that's when we become too emotional.
I want to read this to you. This is going to blow you away, because these are the 4 questions that, and again, Byron Katie does not own this. It's just her encapsulation of some pretty classic stuff. But these are the 4 questions Byron asks. Is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? Which is just a rephrasing of what you said earlier. How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? But here's the 4th one. You said a version of this. Who would you be without that thought? Which is just a different way of saying what you just said.
That's a good one.
And I mean, there's a really long book that just goes into depth over and over on these questions, but these are just some of the ways of framing it. But I think there's some really powerful stuff here, because it's all about questioning belief systems.
Yeah, I really like that. Yes, it is.
If anybody wants to dive into that, it's a book called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. She's been around quite a while, so it's worth digging into.
Yeah, I'm going to check that one out. Thank you.
Well, I think it's just going to be the stuff you already know and you arrived at, and it's just going to be slightly different wording on those same questions.
And what's interesting, Andrew, is like, you can ask the same question 10 times in 10 different ways, and it's going to take one of those times to land. It's like the conversations we have with people. It's like going to take 1,000 conversations to the one that lands. And it could be so small as like changing one particular word. This is why language is really important. Like if we use the wrong word with a particular word with a client and it just doesn't land, guess what? Nothing that you just shared landed. So it's really cool. Like a beautiful thing about a relationship with a client is obviously communication and learning what they respond to. Learning and even asking them, like, what's your feeling around this particular language? And I often talk about, probably anyone who's ever listened to me before has probably heard me talk about like discipline versus devotion. I love the word devotion more than I love the word discipline. I think discipline for some people is too restrictive. And it's like, oh yeah, I was really disciplined when. And when they associate discipline, it's when they were really restrictive, didn't see their friends, with all or nothing. And so it's like, discipline doesn't feel that great. Whereas when I think about devotion is like this umbrella for discipline, for love, for resilience, for, hard work, hardest worker in the room. And devotion for me, she's like soft and firm. It feels like love. Like when we love someone, it's not just fluffy all the time. While it has those euphoric feelings, when you love someone, what do? You hold them accountable to the thing they said they would do. You support them, you cheerlead them, but damn, you pull them up when they're not doing the right thing. And that's what devotion is to me. It's holding myself to the highest standard. So that lands, but it might not land for someone else.
I hear it is discipline with passion from a positive place.
Hmm.
There's a purpose. There's a purpose there.
Yeah.
Everybody can find you at Hattie Boydle. So HATTIEBOYDLE. Yes, I've heard people mispronounce your last name before as Boyle all the time.
Oh, I'll take it. Whatever.
Boydle. Is there anywhere else you want to send people to dig into your work?
Look, Hattie Boydle is probably the best one. It's my Instagram. I do my best to respond to everyone that messages me. So please feel free just to ask me a question. I love helping people. I do have Flex Method, which is my other Instagram. It's my online transformation company. But like I said, Hattie Boydle is probably the best place to find me. And I do my best to message everyone that does reach out.
This is wonderful and a treat. Great you can finally get some face-to-face time. Everybody, go please follow Hattie. You're going to see, you got to dive deeper here because a lot of the pictures is going to be physique stuff. You got to read the captions here, okay? There's a lot of wisdom in the captions. Okay.
Please read the captions. Take a lot of time writing notes.
Again, I really want to highlight, I think your philosophy to coaching aligns so closely with mine. I love diving into belief systems. I love asking about what are your stories. And obviously for the coaches listening, there's a masterclass in here, but for the enthusiast, take this stuff, internalize it. And maybe you start probing things that are a little bit uncomfortable. Well, maybe there's a reason why it's uncomfortable. So tread carefully, but challenge yourself there. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. If you enjoyed this, throw me a review, okay? Please go follow Hattie, but throw me a review that way and get out in front of more people. Thanks, everybody.